Picture this: you're walking through the streets of ancient Rome in the year 67 AD, and you witness something that makes your blood run cold. The emperor himself, Nero, is strolling through the forum with what appears to be his new wife, a stunning young woman draped in silken jewels. But whispers follow in their wake because everyone knows the horrifying truth. That woman beside the most powerful man in the world was once a boy named Sporus, and what Nero did to him represents one of the most disturbing acts of psychological and physical abuse in recorded history. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. What you're about to hear isn't just another tale of Roman excess. It's the story of how absolute power can transform love into obsession, grief into madness, and a human being into a living doll created to serve one man's twisted fantasy. The name Sporus might not be familiar to you, but his story will haunt you long after you finish listening. Nero, the man at the center of this tragedy, wasn't born a monster. When he became emperor at just 16, many Romans saw him as a symbol of hope. He cut taxes, supported public games, and even presented himself as an artist and performer who delighted the common people. At first, his reign seemed like a refreshing break from the rigid, militaristic emperors who came before him. Crowds cheered when he took the stage, his image spread across coins and statues, and poets sang about the dawning of a golden age. But absolute power is like a poison. Slowly, it erodes the mind of anyone who wields it unchecked. By his mid-20s, Nero had become increasingly paranoid, convinced that rivals were lurking in every corner. He executed advisors, banished critics, and surrounded himself with flatterers terrified to tell him the truth. Isolation, wealth, and unchecked authority turned a once promising youth into something unrecognizable. And at the heart of his unraveling was his great passion, Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea wasn't just beautiful, she was clever, ambitious, and dazzlingly confident. Compared to Octavia, Nero's quiet and reserved first wife, Poppaea was radiant. She commanded attention wherever she went, and Nero fell for her completely. Their affair, scandalous in its beginning, consumed him. He divorced Octavia and staged an extravagant wedding to Poppaea that shocked even Rome's elite. But Nero's love was never healthy. He smothered Poppaea with attention, showered her with jewels and silks from across the empire, and filled his palaces with portraits and statues of her likeness. He stationed guards around her day and night, claiming to protect her, but really ensuring no one else could get too close. To Nero, she was not a person, she was an extension of himself, an object to be possessed completely. Yet Poppaea was no passive ornament. She was shrewd, politically astute, and unafraid to voice her opinions. She influenced Nero's decisions, advanced her family's power, and even challenged him openly. Unlike everyone else in the imperial court, who bowed to Nero's every whim, Poppaea dared to resist. And in 65 AD, during an argument whether about his endless indulgences, his performances, or his neglect of duty, Nero snapped. Poppaea, pregnant with their child, was struck so violently by her husband that both she and the unborn heir perished. The emperor of Rome, ruler of 60 million souls, had killed the one person he loved most. What followed was not grief as most of us know it, but a descent into madness. Nero embalmed Poppaea's body instead of cremating it, built her a tomb fit for a goddess, and even declared her divine. He held ceremonies in her honor, spoke to her corpse, and demanded courtiers treat her as if she were still alive. Banquets left her seat open, advisors referred to her in the present tense, and anyone who suggested moving on was punished. It was in this climate of delusion that Sporus entered the story. Sporus was a teenager, born a slave in the imperial household and freed while still young. He had been raised within palace walls, educated to serve in administrative roles, and by all accounts lived a life of relative privilege. But in Rome, privilege meant nothing when the emperor's gaze fell on you. And for Sporus, the reason was chilling: his face. Ancient sources tell us that Sporus bore a striking resemblance to Poppaea, particularly in his delicate features and expressive eyes. For Nero, broken by guilt and grief, Sporus wasn't just a boy. He was an opportunity, a chance to undo the past, to bring back the woman he had lost. There was one problem. Sporus was male, but for an emperor who thought himself divine, who commanded armies and bent reality to his will, gender was no obstacle. He ordered physicians to surgically alter Sporus, stripping him of his identity forever. The procedure was brutal, primitive, and excruciating, with a high risk of death, yet Sporus survived. From that point on, Nero remade him. Sporus was dressed in the empress's gowns, adorned with her jewels, and even renamed Sabina Poppaea's own name. Tutors trained him to walk, speak, and behave like a Roman noblewoman. His hair was styled elaborately, his face painted with cosmetics, his every movement reshaped to mimic the woman he could never truly be. Imagine the torment of waking up every day to a reflection that no longer felt like your own. Then came the spectacle that stunned Rome, Nero's wedding. Yes, a full imperial wedding, complete with vows, rituals, feasts, and musicians. Guests played their part, offering congratulations and gifts, while beneath the surface they must have felt horror. The Emperor of Rome had married a boy, forced into the role of his dead wife. From that day forward, Sporus lived as the empress. He sat beside Nero at state banquets, accompanied him to festivals, and traveled as though he were truly Poppaea reborn. For Nero, the illusion was real. He addressed Sporus by Poppaea's name, reminisced about memories that never existed, and expected responses as though the boy had actually lived her life. For Sporus, every word and gesture became a performance. One slip, one hesitation, could mean death. And somehow, he endured, but history was merciless. When rebellion toppled Nero in 68 AD, Sporus's nightmare didn't end. Passed from one powerful man to another, he became a living trophy, a grotesque reminder of Rome's most infamous emperor. Each new master forced him to continue the illusion, dressing him as a woman, calling him Sabina, and keeping the fiction alive. Finally, under Emperor Vitellius, Sporus faced the ultimate humiliation. He was ordered to appear in the arena, to act out a degrading mythological scene for the amusement of thousands. After years of having his identity stolen, his body altered, and his humanity erased, this was to be his final debasement. But Sporus made one last choice. He refused. Facing the unbearable prospect of public humiliation, he took his own life, likely by poison, around the age of 20. And with that, his story ended. For ancient historians, Sporus was a footnote, a symbol of Nero's excess and cruelty. But when we look closer, we see something more, a teenager robbed of his future, forced into a role he never wanted, and ultimately choosing death over further degradation. His suicide was both a tragedy and a final act of defiance, a way of reclaiming the one thing he had been denied, the right to control his own fate. Sporus's life reminds us that behind the grandeur of empires and the tales of rulers are countless human stories, often forgotten, often buried beneath the weight of history. His is not just a story of Rome, but a story about power, obsession, cruelty, and the resilience of the human spirit. And even across 2,000 years, it still asks us a haunting question. What happens when love, grief, and power consume a man so completely that he destroys not only those around him, but himself?